You both, I think, expect a fairly modest recovery here, at least nothing like we would normally expect. But you think we're going to have a better than a consensus jobs recovery. Doesn't that lead you to believe that growth can still be stronger than the 2% sort of tepid expectations that most economists have?
Yeah, I mean, the reason Larry Summers was sounding a little bit cautious here is we're very early in the recovery, and we're not in a 5% economy now. We are looking at about a 3% growth recovery. But I do think that people are going to feel a little bit better about things as we get into the middle of the year, or when we start seeing some decent job growth. And I think there are two reasons for job growth going forward. One is, over time, as GDP continues to grow, companies come under more and more pressure to hire. And the other is that, frankly, companies overfired during the recession. The drop in hours worked was much bigger than the drop in output. So I think there's a bounce back we should see in the labor market, similar to what we're seeing in the inventory numbers. So I think by mid-year, people are going to feel a little more confident about this recovery.
Mark, what about you? How quickly do you think we see that bounce back in the labor market?
Well, let me correct something that your reporter just said about stimulus. I think stimulus was key to the fourth quarter. I mean, it was very critical to business fixed investment because there was a tax bonus depreciation in the stimulus that expired in December and juiced up fixed investment. It also is very critical to housing and residential investment because of the housing tax credit, and the decline in government spending would have been measurably greater without the money from the stimulus. So the stimulus was very, very important in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
there's no smoking data gun there, but very
money
important.
mark didn't come directly in from government spending, however. It was, as you mentioned, indirect. And, of course, the question is that going to be like the housing thing, the first-time home buyers tax credit? Are we just pulling business investment forward that then's not going to be made later in 2010?
Well, and this is the point. The stimulus is providing significant benefit now, but its contribution to growth will fade as the year progresses, and the inventory swing isn't going to provide the same juice, obviously, as we move forward, too. So GDP growth will slow in 2010, and I'm not sure that we're going to get enough growth to really cause businesses to go out and hire aggressively like Ethan is anticipating. I'm hoping he's right, but I'm fearful that he's wrong. And if we don't get that job growth, the recovery won't evolve into a self-sustaining economic expansion. So in my view, I think policymakers need to remain very aggressive to make sure that hiring does begin.
Ethan, do you see that happening? I mean, the president announcing more and more plans to try and build jobs with some of that stimulus money. It doesn't seem like as much as he's going to spend on nuclear power plants, but still we're talking about tens and tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that the stimulus isn't over. I mean, both for political reasons and because it makes sense economically, we're going to continue to see new fiscal plans rolled out, new attempts to support the housing market. If the job market doesn't get growing on its own, we'll see stimulus aimed more directly at the job market. And also the Fed is still there. A lot of people think about the Fed as being on this time clock now where they're just waiting to hike interest rates. I don't think that's right. I think they're going to react as they see the economy. I think policymakers know that they have to finish the job here. They have to make sure the recovery is sustained. If you don't sustain the recovery, there's no healing of the wounds. You got to keep that recovery going. So I think more policy will come if necessary.
You know, no one knows more about wounds than the consumer right now. We know how important the consumer is to the overall economy. Consumer demand rose at about a 2% pace, falling about a 2.8% decrease, or increase, I should say, in the previous 3 months. So, Mark, I mean, are you a little worried that the consumer still left out here, and it's going to be a long time before we see them coming really back strongly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it all boils down to those jobs. I mean, unless we get the job creation, we won't see the income that will be the fodder for future consumer spending. So this jump in GDP has to translate into hiring and net job creation in a significant way. I mean, just to stabilize unemployment, we need to see 125 to 150,000 net new jobs every single month, and we're not even close to that. I mean, in January, we're going to get January employment data next Friday. It's going to probably show that we lost more jobs in January. So we still have a ways to go, and there's still good reasons to be nervous that consumers won't have the income to power the economy forward.
Ethan, let me ask you something. A point that Mark made about whether or not we're going to see business spending sustained. How much of a surprise that we saw such a big jump in equipment and software spending, and is that going to continue? Are we going to have a business-led, demand-led expansion, or are we going to have a consumer-led expansion?
Well, we're definitely not going to get a consumer-led expansion. I mean, the consumer is facing a lot of structural issues and will lag, I think, throughout the recovery. It doesn't mean there won't be some growth, but it'll be lagging growth. It is going to be more about business spending. Certainly in the near term, it's all about stimulus. If we didn't have the stimulus package, as Mark suggested, we would not be in a recovery right now. We're very dependent on stimulus. However, I do, getting back to my original point, as Mark said, we need to get job growth. And we need to remember what happened in the recession. There was no other country that had anything close to the firings that happened in the United States. We fired something like 2 to 3% more workers than we needed to. The job recovery I'm talking about is not a boom. It's companies rehiring some of those people they laid off during the panic phase of the recession. We haven't seen it yet, so this is a forecast, and of course we've got to be very nervous about it, but I think that we will see decent job growth later in the year.